Welcome back to the inaugural JNS International Policy Summit. I'm Ariella Novak. I am here in the Walls of Astoria in Jerusalem. I am a journalist and co-founder of Shield Communications, PR, Bottom Line Media, and I am your host today. And I couldn't be more excited to speak with Michal Cotler-Wunsh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This summit brings together world leaders. Who have you met here that you've heard something new from?
Well, devastatingly, actually, all of the people that have been here speaking are very familiar with precisely what it is that we are at the existential forefront of. The something new that I will be speaking about is the imperative to actually join together the battlefronts that have been described throughout this conference, and I'm sure we'll drill down on some of those.
Absolutely. As a former member of the Knesset, you've been actively addressing the rise of anti-Semitism and the global issues within media. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. In many, many ways, what has happened, including not just in the lead up to the October 7th massacre, which we have to remember as an attack of barbarism on civilization, but even more importantly, as I said at the UN 1 month after the October 7th massacre, as the Kristallnacht moment of our times. The question was how we would respond to the Kristallnacht moment. Devastatingly, international media has been part and parcel of the fueling of the mainstreaming of the legitimization of anti-Semitism in its new, mutated, lethal strain of anti-Zionism, that is the denial of Israel's very right to exist. In many, many ways, what we have seen since October the 7th is much more troubling because it has allowed the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism, if you will, again, across spaces and places, be it the international law and human rights infrastructure, be it the university campus space, and be it the online space. And where international media would have had a critical role is precisely in doing the role of media as watchdog of democracy. Instead, what we have seen is precisely the opposite. Watchdog of democracy, if you will, enabling the attack on democracies.
Absolutely. Now, there was the pre-October 7th, yes, anti-Semitism exists. Now there's the post-October 7th blow-up. Talk about that.
What we have seen in the aftermath of October the 7th is not just a blow-up, it is a tsunami. And as you accurately pointed out, October the 7th didn't invent anything. October the 7th is the result of decades of an unconventional war for public opinion that demonized and delegitimized and applied double standards instead of to the individual Jew.
Yes.
That is the strain of anti-Semitism that actually enabled the Shoah, the Holocaust. We just marked Holocaust Remembrance Day. Instead of the individual Jew, that anti-Semitism didn't die in Auschwitz. It just morphed to the systematic demonization, delegitimization, double standards of the Jew among nations, that is the proverbial Jew, that is the state of Israel, to which Jews returned after thousands of years of exile and persecution 77 years ago. Now, October the 7th was the opening shot of what then became a multi-front war, openly intent to annihilate the state of Israel. But that multi-front war was enabled by the responses to October the 7th, and I want to be clear, responses of silence, me too unless you're a Jew, responses of denial that began even as the savages that perpetrated the war crimes and crimes against humanity of October 7th live streamed their atrocities, responses of justification. Scholars like Judith Butler, who I studied in law school, explaining that rape is armed resistance, and responses of attack of Jews and Zionists across spaces and places, on campuses, on streets, in workplaces, at their homes, in synagogues and community centers around the world.
How do we invoke change?
The first critical understanding, from my perspective, is that anti-Semitism is just a manifestation that, in the words of the late Rabbi Sachs, has for thousands of years been the most reliable sign of a major threat to humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. Anti-Semitism is not a problem of Jews.
No,
it's a problem of anti-Semites and of the places and spaces that allow them to fester, to spread, to mutate in the way that we have seen over the last decades. Now, the first thing that needs to be, I'm going to say, understood deeply is that this is a war. It's not just about public diplomacy.
And it's not just a war in Israel.
Oh,
it's a global war. So to me, all fronts is not just the 7 fronts here in Israel. It's the global front.
So I'll say what I say in many, many spaces. What we are experiencing through the lens of anti-Semitism is the raging 8th front that not only threatens existentially the state of Israel and Jews around the world, but Israel is just on the front lines of this existential war, openly declaring its intent to destroy all who cherish life and liberty. Democracies around the world, the West, had better wake up, because the sirens are not only ringing, they are blaring. And though they could only be heard in Israel, as I said, this 8th war front that has been raging since the October 7th massacre in this 18-month period, it is responsibility of the international community not only to address the challenge that faces the state of Israel, but through that challenge understand that it's the foundations of democracies that are at risk as we speak.
Now, I just had a conversation with the foreign minister, I believe, of Panama, and he was telling me all about how, I said, what does the anti-Semitism look like in Panama? And he said with a smile, we don't have any. I said, no, but what about across college campuses? And after he's saying as well, they pulled out of the ICC. How do we get this not just to be a place, not a Panama, Hungary, I correct myself, but Hungary. How do we get this to be a place of not just Hungary following, it's global countries doing the same?
So we have to be very, very clear. The hijacking and weaponization of the international institutions, the UN, you mentioned the ICC, the ICJ, that we have seen systematically. By the way, the opening shot, the first blood libel, was the 1975, we're about to mark 50 years, the 1975 Zionism is Racism UN resolution. Soviet propaganda, alive and well, on university spaces, as you mentioned, online, Zionism is racism. The next blood libel, if you will, that has enabled this moment that we're going to have to recognize is the 2001 Durban Conference Against Racism, that turned into an anti-Semitic hate fest and made clear that it is human rights, the secular religion of our times, that has been hijacked and weaponized, as I said, to demonize, delegitimize, and apply double standards to the Jew among nations. And the most dangerous hijacking, weaponization happened in the aftermath of October the 7th, 2023.
Absolutely.
In the hijacking of genocide, a term coined by Raphael Lemkin to describe the atrocities of the Holocaust, the hijacking of the Holocaust itself to justify, if you will, the annihilation of the Jew among nations. Now, if we do not make clear that anti-Zionism, that is the denial of the state of Israel's right to exist, that only the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism includes, if we do not make clear that that is not a political statement, that is the new modern mutated strain that unleashed all former strains of anti-Semitism, including the 11 examples listed in that IRA working definition of anti-Semitism, then no country will be able to identify and combat anti-Semitism comprehensively, whether it comes from the extreme left, the extreme right, or the extreme Islamists, the key word being extreme. And in that sense, the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism enables and demands we transcend real or perceived differences of politics, of geography, of religion, to comprehensively identify and combat anti-Semitism in all of its strains and forms.
Wow, well, I can sit here and discuss this with you further. I know you have a panel to attend. I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. Michal Cotler-Wunsh, Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Antisemitism. You do so much for all of us here in Israel, around the globe. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
It's
and
not
one
an easy
last
job.
word.
One last word, of course.
One last word to say, each and every individual that's watching or listening, we are each boots on the ground on that 8th war front, as we've described it. Each and every person on university campus, at work, at home, whether we're in Israel, the 45% of us fighting the other 7 war fronts, or whether we're the rest of the Jewish people and our friends in the international community on the front lines of this war in a never again is now moment.
I can't think of a stronger way to end this segment by saying never again means never again. And please stand by, stay with us today. JNS Conference, Ariella Novak, Michal Cotler-Wunsh. Stand by, we have more news for you, more exciting interviews, more things to learn. I'll talk with you guys soon.